Welcome back, everyone, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I'm Jesse Collings, joined as always with Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how are you doing today on a lovely Friday?
Yeah, I'm doing well. While doing research for this episode here, I was checking out the WrestleMania 38 card, and not very inspiring. I still say I'm biased since I don't always watch WWE on a weekly basis. But even then, for even a casual viewer, the casual fan, as many people like to say WWE attracts to, not very appealing card so far, and it doesn't really seem like the ramp up, especially the Stone Cold Kevin Owens stuff, doesn't really seem to be elevating the card even further.
Yeah, with the Austin thing, I'm really interested in knowing. I haven't seen an update yet from WrestleTix, but I know around this time last week, before the Austin announcement hit, they were right at about 59,000 tickets sold for each night of WrestleMania. They're about equal between night one and night two. And obviously we got the Austin announcement on Monday. And I'd be really interested in seeing, like, in the resulting days, like how many more tickets were sold based off the Austin announcement. Because like you said, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of hype or buzz around it. I think there's a number of reasons for that. But to kind of jump right into our discussion point, which is talking about kind of the use of celebrities in wrestling and what kind of value they bring to the table, and you talking about the WrestleMania card, and it's kind of indicative of WWE. Like right now we have at a minimum 3 celebrity matches at WrestleMania, if you count Ronda Rousey as a celebrity, which I kind of do, even though she's also a full-time wrestler to an extent. So you have her match, and then you have the Johnny Knoxville match with Sami Zayn, and then you have Logan Paul, who's teaming with The Miz. It's Logan Paul, right?
It's Logan Paul, but I also have the Pat McAfee match too.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So it's 4.
Yeah. So it's 4. You're right. So I can never remember like Logan Paul and Jake Paul. Like I have no idea.
It is Logan Paul.
I have no idea which one's which. Like who fought who. Like I know they're both boxers. They're both they both became YouTube people.
Yep.
But anyway, so looking at the Johnny Knoxville match is a good example. Like on a really strong card, I have like no use for the celebrity match on it because I'm a wrestling fan. Chances are like I'm not gonna have I have a strong affinity for like very few celebrities in my life, like that, like people I would care to see them doing something outside of their normal field. I just don't care about the celebrity match. The celebrity does like the same kind of goofy spots, and I could skip right over it. But looking at this WrestleMania card, like it's almost like when I'm watching the show, I'm gonna be mildly intrigued by like the Johnny Knoxville Sami Zayn match. And I think that's a sign against I don't really care about anyone in the WWE's mid card. I don't really care about anyone in their main event, to be honest. So like when I'm watching the show, it's not like, oh, I'm really jazzed for this Happy Corbin Drew McIntyre match, as opposed to I wonder what kind of weird thing they're gonna do with Johnny Knoxville. That's kind of curious. Like if I'm watching WrestleMania, my curiosity for some of these celebrities is actually higher than it is to see any what would consider traditional pro wrestling quality on the show.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm kind of in that same way where I'm a fan of a lot of athletes, and even like mentioned this before, I'm a fan of K-pop and all that stuff, but I'm not a fan of seeing those people integrated into a world that they're not familiar with. And so I just want them to stay within their own worlds. Lawrence Taylor famously had a WWE match, but still I'm interested in watching Lawrence Taylor play football. I don't really care about him wrestling, even though he was fine against his match against Bam Bam Bigelow back in WrestleMania 11, I believe it was. It's one of those 10, 11
it's
cards.
Oh yeah, you're right. Which one is that?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. And then it had the big Battle Royale with Refrigerator Perry as well, and that celebrity encounter there. And
it's 11. It's 11. Sorry, I just broke my brain for trying to remember what 12 is in Anaheim, and it's the Iron Man match is the main event, and 11 was in Hartford, Connecticut, and like Diesel versus Shawn Michaels was like the main title program, and then Bam Bam versus Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always been an interesting relationship with celebrities in wrestling, right? Well, like it's either a disaster or it's just a fine sort of affair. Like again with Lawrence Taylor, Bam Bam Bigelow, and speaking of Johnny Knoxville, it reminds me of I think it was in the first Jackass movie where he took on, where he got beat up by Butterbean, and of course Butterbean was also at
WrestleMania legend. Eric
Yeah.
Esch, otherwise known as Butterbean.
Yeah, exactly. And where he just knocks out Bart Gunn, ending his career.
A shoot knockout too.
Yeah, a shoot knockout. And it's probably like the only reason people know who Butterbean is. It's either through pro wrestling or through Jackass. Other than that, I doubt anyone's actually ever seen a Butterbean fight.
Yeah, see, we're a little too young, Jason, to remember like Butterbean, but there was a time where Butterbean was like a well-known cult figure in sports.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For being like this back alley tough man, like boxer, like bare knuckle boxer, kind of like before UFC was really big.
Yeah,
there was this idea that like Butterbean was this like secretly super tough guy. There was a really good
like a Kimbo Slices in that category
too.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good example of a guy who like maybe didn't have like a ton of success, like an organized competition that people would recognize, but people believed was like secretly a badass.
Yep.
There's a really good Sports Illustrated, like Sports Illustrated does the Where Are They Now every summer. They have and they talk about like different sports figures. And I read a story once on Butterbean. I also am pretty sure I saw Butterbean in person when I was in York Beach, Maine, like a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And like I'm pretty sure because like he's a very distinct looking gentleman.
Yeah, exactly.
We're at the beach, so he had his shirt off. I'm like, Dad, that's Butterbean. And he's like, I don't know, I can't really tell. I'm like, that has to be Butterbean. Anyway, yeah. So with the celebrities, you mentioned like that they're either like a disaster or they're kind of fine. I mean, in recent years, I feel like the celebrities, like WWE, whatever they do with them, they usually do a good enough job, like giving them a few spots, giving them a few little moments to shine, like in the match themselves. They're not like really a disaster. Like I think people will look at the Bad Bunny match as a good example of how they use somebody who, maybe had like a limited athletic talent in Bad Bunny, but they gave him a few spots. They gave him the Canadian Destroyer. They had him work with John Morrison, who's gonna like do all he could to make him look good. And so like I feel like the standard, and I think that's true. Like, I mean, Rousey's kind of different because she's like a trained pro wrestler. Same with Pat McAfee to a degree. I'm sure Logan Paul is going to be fine. Like he's used to training and was a good amateur wrestler in high school and is like an athlete that can learn things. Johnny Knoxville, I have no idea. That seems like a comedy match more, but
yeah.
It's like I feel like the standard is like, because the standard is kind of objectively so low because we know these people are non-wrestlers, that any moment of like basic competency is like, oh, that looked pretty good. And I feel like we've seen that. Like it's been a while since we saw like a real disaster of a celebrity match.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't really think of one, but I think social media definitely plays a part in this, where if you do look really bad, it's going to go viral on social media, and it's definitely not a good look for especially celebrities and their brands. I think especially with so like especially if you're trying to sell something, Johnny Knoxville is trying to sell his Jackass, the new movie and all that stuff there. Ronda Rousey, she has a reputation to keep up. She still carries around that moniker, the baddest woman on the planet. And so if she looks silly, it doesn't really look good for you, especially if it trends on social media. You'd rather be a good trend rather than a bad one, for the most part, at least. I guess Logan Paul might be different. His reputation isn't really that strong, and he's been elevated to these kind of positions because of his bad reputation, or his mixed reputation at best, for himself there. But I definitely think social media plays a part in that. I think it would be very much different than like, 20, 30 years ago, where, it was just sort of a blip on the radar for some of these matches. Especially if you look back on like the Dennis Rodman and the Karl Malones of WCW, like that was just a blip in WCW's existence. Though granted, a lot of bad things happened in WCW. And so that was just maybe a footnote in all the disaster that WCW was in the late 90s.
You forgot about David Arquette, Jay Leno.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's like yeah, like I remember like Maria Menounos had a match at WrestleMania that was not good.
Snooki.
See, like Snooki, they gave like 3 spots to her, and I feel like I only saw the match once live, but I feel like she hit her spots. She hit like a handspring elbow, and she did like, like a basic, she did something like on the apron, something like really basic. Like they don't ask these people to do a lot because they know they can do a lot. My thing with the celebrities is that I think that the in the ring is not really a concern for me, like, because like as you mentioned, there's usually a relatively decent baseline that they will get these people to. It's the out of the ring stuff that I think is difficult for celebrities to grasp, to project like charisma. Like I think Bad Bunny was a good example because I'm not super familiar with Bad Bunny as a performer, but I believe and accepts that he's a charismatic person. He has stage presence. As being as successful of a musician as he is. But like when he was doing like his segments and he was like backstage, like I was like, this guy like has like no charisma. What's up with that? And you can point to other people. I think like even like the way WWE is using Logan Paul, like I don't get it. Like Logan Paul is a charismatic guy who is very good at he's essentially, he plays a wrestling heel with his celebrity boxing, and he cuts promos like he's, for a time was successful at creating interest in his pay-per-views. We know that he's like capable of projecting a certain level of star charisma. But when I see him in these Raw segments, he's like the Mrs. Lackey, like it's just very strange to me. Like he doesn't have the kind of charisma in wrestling that he does outside of wrestling. And I don't understand why that would be the case, other than I don't think WWE utilizes these people properly. Or it's just kind of the kind of charisma you need in pro wrestling is just so different than you would need it outside of wrestling that it doesn't always translate.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you kind of look at AEW and the main celebrity they use is Dan Lambert, but it's not really a fair comparison because if you know Dan Lambert, he's a very hardcore pro wrestling fan, along with being an MMA trainer, and he runs American Top Team. But like, I think Tony Khan told a story where he has like old pro wrestling belts he collects at his house. He has like a bunch of like from like the old NWA and that kind of stuff there in different territories, and all these pro wrestling belts. And so he's clearly a fan of pro wrestling. And so it's really hard to compare his his presence on AEW television to like like you said, Logan Paul or Bad Bunny, because like at least I know Bad Bunny says he's a fan of pro wrestling, but I think it's on a different level than Dan Lambert, who is clearly a hardcore wrestling fan, and he knows he's watched all the greats cut heel promos, and that's certainly what he's channeling in his performances there. Like other than that, like AEW has used Shaq, and he was just Shaq. He wasn't really asked to do much in his segments. It was mostly Cody carrying all that there, and Brandy was also doing her parts in the build up as well. And so it at least for AEW, they don't really ask their celebrities to do a lot. Even for American Top Team themselves, they're kind of just in the background with everyone else sort of carrying them, and Dan Lambert especially carrying his own people. And so yeah, it is an interesting view because on one hand, it does kind of compliments pro wrestling, saying for professional wrestlers, say, hey, we have this unique charisma that projects on the pro wrestling screen. But at the same time, it's like it is very much a different world for these celebrities. It's not just acting. Like on a movie set is very much a very different kind of a thing that is very unique to pro wrestling.
Well, if you remember when WWE signed Gronk,
yep,
and there was this whole thing where that Gronk was like this this incredible celebrity signing, because throughout his NFL career, people compared Gronk to a pro wrestler. And it seemed like such a natural fit because Gronk was this really charismatic personality on the football field. And he's obviously really big and his name is perfect for wrestling. And all of these things like, oh, Gronk is going to be great at pro wrestling. And this was a point that I originally heard Jim Valley make, but he said that like Gronk is good at what people who don't watch pro wrestling think like all pro wrestling is, which is like shouting into the camera and flexing your muscles. And the reality is when we saw Gronk on screen, he wasn't a natural at pro wrestling. That charisma wasn't shining through. People thought he was super annoying. Like it just didn't work. And it was a perfect example of like, there's a lot more that goes into being a successful, charismatic personality in pro wrestling than just like your look and like, yelling into the camera. And I thought that really kind of exposed a lot of things about, like people maybe who think it's easier than it is to come across like a star in pro wrestling, and the kind of nuances you need to understand to get things over and to get yourself over and to get people interested in what you have to say and what actions you are doing. It doesn't always come easily to people. And I think you see that in how these celebrities are used. I think, like we can talk about Ronda, when Ronda first came back at the Royal Rumble and like the first Raw after that, like this is a disaster. Like she looks miserable. She looks like she doesn't want to be here. She looks like she's putting in zero effort. She did nothing in that Royal Rumble match. It came across, I was like, I don't know if she's going to make it to WrestleMania because she looks like she'd rather do anything else than pro wrestling right now. And I think that's gotten better. And I think that she's done a better job like in the last month or so as far as like becoming less miserable of a personality to watch. And she's, trying to get over at least putting in at least an effort to be a babyface, when earlier she admitted that she just didn't like the fans. But to me, it's like, I don't know if there's parts of it where I'm like, oh, she's a natural at this. But there's other parts of it where I'm like, she's never going to get it when it comes to just the overall pro wrestling package. And I'm not even talking about in the ring. I'm talking just like understanding the business. She seems kind of lost at certain portions of it. But in other times, you're like, oh, she's like a great natural performer.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear her talk about her experience in pro wrestling. She was very she enjoyed the house shows, the live events, because she was free to do whatever she wanted. And so I'm very curious like what kind of direction she's getting from the Vince McMahon types, or whoever else is her producer backstage, whether she is being overcoached perhaps, or whether it is mostly just her out there. And so I'm very curious on that perspective behind the scenes. But yeah, like she's always going to have a very mixed reaction from fans, because like you said, she had that rants online about how dumb pro wrestling is and how dumb the fans are, and she went against the fans. Of course, people were wondering, what is this a shoot, is this a work? Maybe it's a little bit of both, since she's mostly been portrayed as a baby face in this upcoming build, and she isn't really going full heel, which I guess another thing to add to the celebrities, right? Most of the time, celebrities are treated as baby faces, unless for unique circumstances that make them heels, like Logan Paul, of course. He has a very mixed reputation as well, so they go on to the heel side for the most part, because he mostly gets booed by a lot of people.
It was last year, 2 years ago, he was a babyface like a few years ago when they had him in, and that was everyone said like, why are they using this guy's babyface? Nobody likes him. And by the way, I think they're going to turn him babyface at WrestleMania, because if you watch the Raw segment, which is like, they talk about being from Cleveland, and Logan Paul's like really proud to be from the Cleveland area, and Miz is like running down Cleveland, and at the end, Logan Paul's like kind of like, why'd you run? Like they're not on the same page. It makes it feel like they're going to end the match like, with Logan Paul like knocking the Miz out after the match when they lose at WrestleMania.
Or giving like a low blow or something like that, But for Ronda Rousey, I think the talent is definitely there in the ring, but it's always the outside stuff that you mentioned before, that like, the charisma, the promos, just putting other people over, putting yourself over. I think it's just that balance there is always, up and down for her in her run in WWE.
Yeah, I think she's benefit. So the long-term picture with Ronda, she's benefiting right now from working with Charlotte, in the sense that Charlotte is a pretty unpopular wrestler in WWE, in the sense that very few people are going to be rooting for Charlotte when she's feuding against Ronda Rousey. The problem for Ronda is that apparently she's going to be here for at least another year, through the next WrestleMania. We'll see how that goes. But if I look at like, okay, what are your other big Ronda Rousey matches besides Charlotte? Okay, Ronda Rousey versus Sasha Banks, Ronda Rousey versus Bayley, Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch, which is supposedly the plan for next year's WrestleMania. Ronda versus Bianca Belair. I don't care if those people are all heels. If Ronda's a babyface, people are not going to cheer for her against those people. And I think that's when it becomes a big problem, because we're back at square one, where if you insist on her being a babyface, she's gonna get booed. And Ronda doesn't like that. We know for a fact she doesn't like that. And she'll blame the wrestling fans, because that's what people like to do. They like to blame the fans. But the reality is that wrestling fans don't like celebrities for the most part, because especially when they're like being pushed into the title picture. You can accept a celebrity in a mid-card match. You can accept them in like a comedy undercard match. You can accept them like, feuding with the Miz or someone like that. But people do not want to see celebrities like actually in the title picture. And I know Ronda is a legitimate athlete with combat sports credentials, and so you're not like cheapening the business by saying like, oh, this person who's not a trained wrestler can win the title, when obviously Ronda could beat any of these people in like a shoot fight, based on our MMA background. So it's not like you're cheapening it, but people, I think, just don't want to see a celebrity. People might want to like celebrities, but they don't want to see them pushed like above a certain level, for the most part.
Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting thing with fans. I think it's always this idea of earning the title, quote unquote, earning it. People who do it in the traditional way, whether it's through the
You
indie background.
deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those kind of things, right? And I think that can be a bit exaggerated, but I guess obviously in the case for celebrities, it is different, right? It's different than like an actual wrestler doing it, but for celebrities, it is different. With Ronda winning titles, it takes away a push potentially for another person. In WWE's case, I don't know how much that is, especially with Bianca Belair, and how inconsistent they are with pushing her, or just the lack thereof. But yeah, like I agree that fans, they're going to turn on Ronda Rousey if she's presented as a babyface against Becky Lynch, who they want to present as a heel. It just switch those around. You could easily have a hot program like they did in, was it 3 years ago now, with the triple threat match, with Charlotte, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch. They're going into the match. It was very hyped. A lot of fans were into it because they had the dynamics correct. Ronda was sort of in between, but people really wanted Becky Lynch to win both belts at the end, and they got the results at the end. And that's why that was the perfect synergy for in terms of hype from their fans. But like you said, long term, I don't know where this is going, especially because for Ronda Rousey, her real life popularity has kind of waned a bit. She is pretty much out of mixed martial arts, just for various reasons. I think don't want to just litigate all that there, the Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes losses, but still, like, those losses kind of retired her for the most part. And she dabbled in movies, but like her movie career wasn't really, that impressive. She was in Furious 7 in a cameo. She wasn't really that impressive there. Most people didn't really say that was their favorite part of the movie. I remember they're going to do a Roadhouse remake, like a remake, and she was going to star in that, but because of her MMA losses, they kind of just canceled that movie. And so, like, Just this WWE is pretty much the biggest thing she has going, other than her own personal businesses she has going on. But like in terms of like mainstream popularity, WWE is really the only thing she's got, and so it's kind of an interesting relationship going on there, where she kind of needs WWE if she wants to remain, relevant in the I guess the mainstream zeitgeist.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely not as big of a star as she was when she first showed up in WWE.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it goes, and it goes a lot in combat sports. And I do think it kind of does bring an interesting question about like, what are we using celebrities for in in wrestling in 2022? If you look back historically, the use of celebrities, you can go way back if you really wanted to wrestling matches in like the 30s and 40s, when like James Braddock was a special guest referee. Or I don't know if why can't I remember his name right now? Who's the, Jack Dempsey, right? The famous boxer from the 20s.
Yep.
I couldn't remember his first name for a second, but like Jack Dempsey, like he would do special guest. I'm pretty sure he did like special guest referee spots, like he was friends with like Strangler Lewis and stuff like that. You can go far back and see like you wanted to get like another celebrity in to get them involved to sell tickets. You go back into like the glory days of the 80s, like WrestleMania 1, and you had like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper and these people getting involved. And those were obviously huge business successes. Mike Tyson doing really well. I mean, Rodman, his first match, it did pop a buy rate for WCW when he did it.
Yep.
And so like you can say like, okay, we bring in a celebrity because they'll bring, new eyeballs on the product and everything like that. I don't know in 2022 if that's really the case. In general, we have less of a monoculture. Like we don't have a TV star the equivalent of Mr. T, like nobody even close. And it's hard for people to grasp that because, Mr. T was a star on network television and 20 million people watched him each week. So like, there's really not anyone out there that like is really moving the needle this enormous amount as a celebrity, with the exception if you got like someone who was just like a ridiculously big name, like Kanye West or Taylor Swift, or these people that are kind of unrealistic to get for your show. Like I don't know how much any of these people really like. I don't know like how much of a business benefit they're getting by having Johnny Knoxville on the show, or Logan Paul, or even Ronda to an extent. Like I don't know, like are these people really that big celebrities that people who have no interest in the show or mild interest in the show are gonna suddenly tune in and watch? Ratings have been up and attendance have been up since Ronda has come back. You could say that's because of her. You could say it's because it's WrestleMania season and business always goes up there. It'll be interesting to see how stable some of that is. Maybe if she's off some house shows, we'll see like those do as well. It's kind of hard for me to believe that like Ronda Rousey's like this huge draw for WWE at this point in time. I mean, it was certainly the belief when she came in. It certainly helped them with their TV contract negotiations that they had someone who was a proven, ratings mover, and someone who sold a lot of pay-per-views in MMA. I just don't know in 2022 if she still has that kind of attraction. And you can say that about any of these, celebrities that we've seen popping up. And so it becomes kind of a balance between, are you bringing this celebrity in because you think they'll do big business for you, just being a celebrity, or are you bringing the celebrity in because you think you can get something out of them as an individual performer? Like Paige Van Zant is a good example. She just signed with AEW. Is Paige Van Zant like a really big enough name to like pop a rating? I don't know. I'm pretty doubtful of that. But does Paige Van Zant have a fan following, and you're kind of bullish on the idea that she could become a notable wrestling star that would be a good performer for you to have on your roster? It's kind of like that kind of balance. That's where I kind of see a lot of these people. It's like, are like, especially the long-term people like Ronda, like Paige, like Pat McAfee, like, are we really thinking that these people are big enough stars to just one match that they have is going to move the needle a ton? Or is it more like, we think long-term these people can be beneficial because they'll be solid performers and they have a small follow, a certain segment of the fan base who will hear about us through them?
Yes, going back to your point of like there isn't like a big celebrity like a Mr. T back in the day. Ironically, like there is a big celebrity that most people know. It's Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, but he is also a former wrestler. But yeah, he's
Yes.
like the one big megastar.
And The
Now,
Rock
but
would
yeah,
move numbers. Like, I have no doubt about that's a total, The
yeah,
Rock.
but that was a totally different argument though,
Yeah,
because yeah, ironically,
yeah.
he is a former WWE guy,
That's
but yeah,
true.
he's some big
It's funny.
celebrity.
That's funny. It didn't even cross my mind when I was like, I'm like, who's like the biggest celebrity we have? Like, I thought of musicians and stuff like that, but
Right.
you're right. Yeah, like The Rock is probably the biggest movie star in the world, or at least on the level of the other biggest movie stars in the world.
Yeah. Well, obviously he's in a different category within himself because he
Yeah,
is obviously a former
yeah. No,
WWE
and
guy.
Cena, Cena moved business
Yeah, of
when he
course,
came
John
back
Cena.
too.
Yeah, but obviously those guys are in a different category. But yeah, kind of goes into I saved this tweet thread from Lance Storm. He tweeted this back a couple weeks ago, and I don't know what prompted this. It was like a WWE Hall of Fame discussion. I guess some fans are tweeting at him saying that he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He offered Cyndi Lauper, saying that she deserves to be not only in the Celebrity Hall of Fame, but just in the regular WWE Hall of Fame. And he added this line here of how she was giving the WWF the rub, not the other way around. And that's kind of an interesting point there, where like, did Cyndi Lauper, sell more albums because she was in WWF? Sure. But yeah, like obviously she is ingrained within WWF history because of her impact. And you raised a good point how in 2022, there isn't really that kind of impact you see now. That I doubt, any regular normal celebrity outside of The Rock and John Cena, I don't think anyone's actually having that kind of same impact for WWE, except for nostalgia, perhaps. And I think that's where it kind of goes with Ronda Rousey and Brock Lesnar, of why TV executives may be enticed by them. It's not really anything they're doing now. I mean, sure, they do pop ratings and kind of draw business, but it's mostly just for nostalgia because in the UFC's records, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, they've sold the most pay-per-views for them. And so they kind of just go off past success rather than just looking forward to future success. Like, how long is Brock Lesnar going to be a draw? Who knows? But I doubt it's going to be 10 years worth of draw for Brock Lesnar. But I guess who knows? Maybe he's still interested in wrestling 10 years from now. I highly doubt that. Same with Ronda Rousey. I doubt she's interested in wrestling 10 years in the future in 2032. But they have achieved a lot of past success for themselves. And I think that's where it comes from there. And it's kind of interesting with the NIL sort of inclusion for WWE. I've looked into some of the people they brought in, and there's like twin women's basketball stars who've taken advantage of the NIL, and they have like a YouTube channel. They're like on TikTok and Instagram. They've achieved a decent amount of following, and so I guess maybe that's the direction WWE is going in the influencer culture. Certainly, Stephanie McMahon on the earnings calls likes to tout, the brand deals and such there. And so perhaps, that's the future for WWE, which isn't a bad one. That's kind of the one most businesses are going towards anyway with the influencer culture. That's certainly Paige Van Zandt's calling. Like Paige Van Zandt, she was not really a strong UFC fighter. She got into the bare knuckle association, but she's not really a big star there in terms of her fighting skills. But on Instagram and her other social media outlets, she has tons of followers, and that's really her main calling there, just selling brand deals and just posting, thirst traps on Instagram. That's really her big calling. And that's maybe the direction most companies are going now for pro wrestling.
Yeah, it's a good point where we talk about like how it's like a form of advertising in the sense that they talk about it now. So we can mention like but it's a really interesting thing because WWE had this whole third-party crackdown last year that we talked about on the show, where they, you can't have a Twitch channel, you can't make money off of your Instagram account, like, having, your own products and those kind of things that are the way these influencers make money. So someone like a Paige Van Zandt, like, who's making a lot of money off of her social media channels and has their OnlyFans account and has the I'm sure she has different deals, on her Instagram page where she's, sponsored by a swimwear company, makeup company, sunglasses, whatever, these things do. You can't do that if you're in WWE, according to their rules. I don't know, maybe there's some rules are different. Maybe like Ronda Rousey has different rules for her. But it's funny when you talked about the basketball players, they're like Cavender Twins, I think is their last name.
Cavender or Cavendish, one of those.
Yeah. So like they have like this big following on, like you said, TikTok and Instagram, and they are apparently making like millions of dollars allegedly off of all of these, the NIL deals to the NCAA. And it's like, those people are never taking a bump. Like these are people making, allegedly millions of dollars through all these like, third party active channels. And they're going to give that all up to make, X amount of dollars and go to the performance center and like, no. Like, and so like, yeah, maybe the benefit is that maybe they never wrestle, but they, talk about WWE on their social media channel. And that's a way we can reach young people. WWE has no problem with penetration on social media. I mean, they're a real, like, if you look at the numbers, at least they're real runaway, leaders in that field, even compared to other major sports, franchises. They always talk about how many, YouTube subscribers they have and how many Facebook, followers they have and how many, Twitter followers that they have. I don't know like how ultimately beneficial that is to their business. But it is, yes, it is a way for them to like you said, like what Lance mentioned is like giving the rub to WWE, and how that can happen. I think in AEW's case, it's because AEW is such a more like a company in its formative years. I think that the celebrity aspect has a lot more to gain. If you go back to the Mr. T, Cyndi Lauper years, part of the reasons those were so successful is because WWE was on this upward trajectory. And that they, were on the rise, and they got these guys, these men and women who were like giving them, WWF is cool, WWF is hip, we're taking over, we're national expansion, all of that thing. And I think AEW kind of is, because they're new, it benefits them to have celebrities with big followings being like, hey, like, I'm doing this AEW thing. I think it was really helpful. Like we know that the Shaquille O'Neal match that popped a big rating. Like that was one of their biggest. I think that's still like one of their biggest shows they ever did was the one with the Shaq and Jade Cargill versus Red Velvet and Cody match. So that one to me is like a huge success. Like from a celebrity standpoint, is that we're using the celebrity to have this big match, and Shaq is a his playing days are over, but he is a incredible celebrity. Like
yes,
in college, I had a professor, my Spanish teacher, and she did not know who Shaquille O'Neal was. Like it came up a conversation. We were doing exercise where you had to like you had to say somebody or something, and then you had to pick the correct adjective in Spanish to describe them. Like I would say, Shaquille O'Neal, and my partner would say grande. And then so like the teacher saw us, and I said Shaquille O'Neal because I needed to think of something that was grande, and he's the go-to person. And then my partner got it right away, and she's like, "Oh, who's that?" I'm like, "You don't know who Shaq is?" Like, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like he's just like synonymous with like my grandmother knows who he is. Like you don't have to.
Exactly.
She's like, oh, I don't really watch sports. I'm like, it's not like that. Like it's like it's just Shaq. He's so so he's a different level of star. And AEW is in a different position to kind of benefit from that. With WWE, yeah, it's like I don't know if these individuals move the needle. I wanted to bring up. So we talked about Ronda, and I wanted to bring up another person who's a long-term project, who I don't know if you'd even consider necessarily this person a celebrity, but he's definitely on that trajectory, is Gable Steveson.
Okay,
is training to be a full-time WWE professional wrestler, but WWE is made it very clear that he's going to be presented as a big star. For people who don't know, he's the reigning Olympic champion in heavyweight amateur wrestling. He won the gold medal last year in Tokyo. He is, as we speak, I think, this weekend competing for the NCAA championship, which if he wins, he'll be one of like 4 or 5 people to ever win 4 straight.
Yep.
He will be, when he steps in the WWE ring, he will be the best amateur wrestler to ever wrestle in professional wrestling. Better than Kurt Angle, better than, certainly, like, way more accomplished than Brock Lesnar or
Yes.
I'm trying to think of Henri Deglaine who's from the 20s, who was an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, but like Gable Steveson is the best amateur wrestler to ever wrestle in wrestling. And so actually, now I think about it, Alexander Carolyn had a match in rings. I don't know if it was a work or a shoot, but he would actually be more accomplished because he was the Olympic champion a couple times. But anyway, but yeah, so Gable Steveson is like this guy who WWE is training now to wrestle, and they're going to give him a big push. And like I said, I don't know if he's like a celebrity in the sense that I think like his first match is going to pop a huge rating and all these amateur wrestling fans or Olympic fans are going to tune in to see him. But he's definitely someone whose publicity WWE is looking to capitalize, coming off of his gold medal win in at the Olympics. But he will be an interesting guy to watch as well, as far as how he develops as a performer, how quick they push him. Will fans accept him? Will he be really over? Will he have the charisma to be a top star? Will he be able to navigate WWE's weird standards? He's someone else is like a really interesting prospect, because he's kind of like coming in like Ronda Rousey, where they're going to push him like he's a really big star. And I don't know if he's going to be ready. And the standard for top male wrestler is higher than top female wrestler, especially by the time Ronda was coming in, where it's like, if Gable Stevenson's coming out and he's pushed as a top guy, he's going to have to be really fucking good. Like, and I think we have no idea if he's going to be, like, we know he's really athletic, but we don't know if he's going to be good.
I mean, he needs like a hook like debut, but even then, like, all that was part of fan hype. And let's be honest, like, no one's following amateur wrestling. Like, no one knows the work that Gable Stevenson's done in college, and even the Olympics. The ratings were down for the Olympics, and that's for various reasons. Probably because no one knows when the Olympics are on, or when they're live, or what channel to watch them on. But still, not a lot of people watch the Olympics. And so I doubt many people are watching Gable Steveson win the gold medal. And the times that he has appeared, granted, he wasn't really presenting himself as a character. He was just kind of came out as Gable Steveson guy. But I remember a lot of impressions in that SummerSlam appearance were that, Gable Steveson, he doesn't really have much of a presence or charisma. And I think there's another Olympian he was presented with. I think this was her, Tamara Mensah-Stock. I think that was the other person he appeared with. I think more people were impressed with her and her charisma.
Yeah, because she won the gold medal too. It was like, here's the 2 Olympic gold medalists, one male, 1 female.
Yeah, and so like people were impressed with her because she was having like a lot of fun in her SummerSlam appearance. But for Gable, he was just kind of chill, and I think that's probably the impression I get from him in a real life perspective. He seems like a chill guy, and so what he's going to be as a character, who knows? If you look like in the past, Dominic Mysterio hasn't really popped off, and that's kind of more of a project kind of a guy that WWE is dealing with, and Rey Mysterio's son. Definitely helps bring Mysterio within the company, keep Rey in the company. But for Dominic, he hasn't really popped off. And, he is going to have this WrestleMania match against Logan Paul. But I don't know how much that's going to benefit Dominic in any sort of way. And so for Gable, it could work out. But, people thought Chad Gable was, someone that, WWE, they can't, fail this guy. But he's short. But I guess for Gable, I don't think he's that short. I think he is, decently tall, and so maybe that helps him out.
Yeah, no, I mean, Gable is a heavyweight wrestling guy. He's not like as big as Brock Lesnar, but he will definitely come across as like a big guy that can throw people around. Vince famously doesn't like amateur wrestling gimmicks, which is why he always like, it worked. It worked with Kurt Angle. I don't want to compare Gable to Kurt Angle because Angle is a 1 in a million kind of guy when it comes to, obviously, like, Angle was Olympic gold medalist, but Angle was so charismatic. And I think it's unfair for someone to expect, even if he's good as a wrestler as Kurt Angle right away, which is like a almost impossible feat because of how good Angle was early in his career. Like, he's probably not going to be as charismatic as Kurt. But yeah, but like someone like Chad Gable, like forever people were like, why can't Chad Gable just be like this Olympic level wrestler that is really good? Like, why is he Shorty G? And it's because Vince doesn't like amateur wrestling gimmicks. He's got to change them. He's got to give them something to make it a show business aspect of it. He doesn't like, guys in singlets, being amateur wrestlers. They got to do something different. Angle is the only one it really ever worked with. So like, I'll be interested to see how they present Gable as a amateur wrestler. Obviously they're going to hammer home that he was a gold medalist, which obviously anyone would do, but I could see it being something where Vince is like, I don't get this guy. We got to give him something else. And suddenly he's got a weird nickname or a weird name or a weird costume or he's got some dumb catchphrase. And that's more of a WWE problem than it is like a Gable Steveson problem. It's just kind of how Vince operates with these things. But it'll be very interesting to see how his career takes off in pro wrestling when he when he does get here, because it seems like he's already got drafted to Raw. Supposedly he's going to come in, when he's done with his college career, which is going to be like this weekend. I think the championships are this weekend. So we might see him by SummerSlam, on the main roster. And he's going to be someone that I think they want to push as a major star. And I don't know how that's going to go. It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Well, I'm curious what you think about this, Jesse. Like, what do you think his debut looks like? And do you think he goes after a title right away in his debut? Because I do agree that they are going to present him as a big star. They are like you said, they already drafted him into Raw. I mean, who knows how long that will stick? Maybe they'll just say, well, we made a trade. He's traded to SmackDown because for reasons. But how do you see his debut going about? Do you think he goes for a title right away?
I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, if I was booking and he was on the main roster, I would do like a Goldberg, like he's gonna beat up some jabrones like for a while before he's gonna do anything else. Like but the way they're presenting him and the way they're pushing him, and they're really desperate for like main eventers at this point, I could see him getting pushed really quickly. Like I'm sure his first match is going to be like him annihilating like some jobber they have, like Humberto Carrillo or someone that they don't have any faith in. But I could see like a month into his career, he's in the main event picture, he's challenging for a title at pay-per-view because they want to have a top star. I would advise against that, obviously, but that's what I think they'll probably do with him. I think if you had to guess, I would say like a month or two of squashing guys. He beats like a Dolph Ziggler or someone like that, like someone with a smidge more credibility than like your typical job guy. But I could see him winning the Royal Rumble next year. Like it wouldn't surprise me, because I think that the way they've gone about it is that this guy's going to be a huge star, and they're going to try. And we know when Vince really believes in someone being a huge star, they're going to push them at all costs.
Yeah, I guess the only question after that is just how long will Vince, have this affection towards Gable, and what happens if he gets tired of him, or if he feels like it's not working in a significant type of way, because I don't know how much of a needle mover Gable is going to be. If he does have a mega push, like you said, like a Goldberg type of push where he's just super exciting, throwing guys around, they do like 3-on-1 handicap match, and he's just, chucking guys. He's like carrying two people at once. Perhaps that could be a big benefit towards him. But yeah, like it's just a wait and see. He seems motivated for this. He's very much hyped up that this is his dream. He's always wanted to be in WWE. A lot of people have said that, and it has very varying successes. Because at the end of the day, it's Vince McMahon's decision of what you're going to do. And I don't think he's built up enough reputation to have his own say. Like, he's still a young kid. He's 21 years old. I don't think he has enough clout to, say, oh, I'm going to do my own promos, because like, no, you've never done a promo. Like, you're going to give you the script, and you're going to read this script, and you have to make it work. And I don't know if he can make it work or not. And I'm sure he's getting training. I think that has been a case, right? Like, he has been getting some various training throughout his amateur career, right?
According to Dave, they set up they have a ring and stuff set up near, like, I don't know if it's on the campus of the university or near the University of Minnesota, like where he's been going and training, like, in between his amateur wrestling preparation. He's been taking bumps in a warehouse somewhere. I mean, with the other thing, and this could be said for all celebrities who are going to be around for a while, when it comes to, like, are they going to understand the business? Are they going to have a sense of entitlement? Are they going to have, I don't want to say like a lack of respect for other people, but it's a tough, especially in WWE, it's very archaic in a lot of ways about like paying your dues and respecting older people, and small things can be seen as big violations, and you're going to wrestler court and all this stuff. Like, it can be hard for somebody coming in from the outside and getting a gigantic push right away, because there's going to be, some resentment on that end. I think in WWE at this point, a lot of the people don't care enough about their spots on the card to be that mad about it. But you come in with an attitude, or you come in with the expectation that you're going to be a top star, and I don't see why Gable wouldn't come in with that expectation given how he's been presented so far. It can take you down a negative path for sure.
Yeah, it kind of brings me to, like, this current card with WrestleMania. Like, Pat McAfee's going up against Austin Theory. Like, what's going to happen in that match? Like, is Austin Theory really going to take a loss? What's that going to do for his career? Because I don't know, like, he seems like a young guy that Vince McMahon likes and wants to push, but at the same time, like, Pat McAfee is a pretty big star, and Vince let Pat McAfee interview him, just sit down with him for his show, and so, like, clearly Vince has some affection towards McAfee as well, and so I'm curious to see how that goes, especially when I wouldn't be surprised if Pat McAfee does beat Austin Theory clean in the ring, and so, like, what's that going to do for him? It's like, I have no idea, because for McAfee, he has been treated as a pretty legitimate wrestler for the most part. He go up against Adam Cole, and Adam Cole made him look good, but at the same time, that's Adam Cole. Like, Adam Cole's really good in the ring, and they had that War Games match as well, and McAfee, he did look part of the elements in that War Games match as well.
Yeah, I mean, this Austin Theory thing, and this can be said. You can talk about Gable Steveson too. You can throw on Braun Breaker, I know who's not a celebrity, but you brought up, like, who's going to win that WrestleMania match. Like, this Austin Theory thing is actually, like, if you listen to people, like, pretty much everyone that I listen to and I've heard from has said that WWE believes in Austin Theory. They think he can be a top star. They're really high on him. And if you watch how he's been presented, he loses, he's a geek, he's an idiot, gets squashed by people, probably going to lose to Pat McAfee at WrestleMania. And, like, it really highlights how the last few years, like, they really have no idea how to book someone as a star. Like, and you see people on social media will say, oh, Austin Theory, he's getting the rub. He's getting in the ring with Brock Lesnar. This is great. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this guy is fucking dead as a performer. Like, who cares about Austin Theory? He gets his ass kicked all the time. And this is allegedly a genuine attempt to get somebody over. They think they're building a big new star by having them lose all the time. And then you get Brock Lesnar. He's doing this shoot interview, right? Brock's like, everyone's lazy. People need to understand how to get over. They don't know, Brock Lesnar's like fucking born on third base for pro wrestling by pro wrestling standards, right? He came in, he spent 2 years being pushed to the moon. He left and hasn't worked a full schedule since. He comes in and he says, oh, these guys are lazy. These guys don't know how to be stars. Everyone, you got to be it yourself. You got to do this yourself. And it's like, fucking Austin Theory. Then like a week later, Brock Lesnar goes out in the elimination chamber, beats up like everyone by himself. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, I can't believe like, people aren't getting over as much as Brock Lesnar, given how they're presented. It's this whole disconnect. And it trickles down to like fans and pundits who actually believe that this is how you're getting somebody over, is by putting them if as long as they're in the ring with someone who's big and famous, therefore they are getting over as a big star. And it's like, that's not how pro wrestling works. And I do think about that with Gable Steveson, which is like, maybe they don't give him the Goldberg push, maybe they have him lose, and they think they'll he has to earn it. They'll think they'll make him a big star that way. And it's like, I'll tell you what, Gable Steveson, if you're really sincere about Gable Steveson, you should not lose a match for like a year. But it's just one of those things when it comes to how they're presenting the people. Right? What are celebrities' records at WrestleMania? I'm sure they're quite good, right?
Yeah, I would imagine they are, especially like half the time they're on tag teams anyway with the babyface, and so it generally is pretty good. And like going back to your point for the being the celebrity gives you a rub. Like, remember Damian Priest? Like, people were talking about how Bad Bunny was giving Damian Priest a rub, but like after Bad Bunny left, Damian Priest just became a guy. Like, sure, he won the U.S. title, but after that, like, just became another guy on the roster. He is not, at least in my eyes, he is not really the biggest star that people wanted him to be. And it was just mostly Bad Bunny being the big star because he did the Canadian Destroyer, and that's pretty cool. But it's mostly just the other person doing the work. If you understand how Canadian Destroyer works, it's mostly the other guy doing the work, and you just have to stand there and make sure kill the other guy while you're in that position.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that an untrained wrestler did it kind of tells you that's not super complicated move. It just looks cool, which is great. Yeah. Every wrestling move should be uncomplicated to do and look really cool. You're right. Like about the Damian Priest thing and these various like people who are going to be working with these celebrities at WrestleMania. Like, it's not really like, okay, it definitely helped Damian Priest that he was working with Bad Bunny. Like, that wasn't a negative for him, but it didn't help John Morrison, who was in the ring with him and lost to him, right? And and it also goes beyond, like, Damian Priest is suffering from a lack of general creative focus and star elevation within WWE. It's not necessarily like he was in that Bad Bunny match and he's been ruined ever since because of it. It's more like they don't know how to capitalize on anybody or build anybody up properly. So he's kind of stuck as a mid-carder because nobody really gets elevated. But that is a longer, more like a broader issue than just like a celebrity issue. I was thinking when you mentioned like, okay, like the celebrities that you really like that you don't want to see like in wrestling, it did make me think of like getting one of these like K-pop groups and they're doing like a 7-man tag match at WrestleMania where they're all standing on the apron and they all got to tag in. Michael Cole's got to like call it, but he's confused and he doesn't know which one's which. And like, they should. I'd be very curious and entertained by that aspect of it. Do you have anything else that we have? I'm trying to think if there are any celebrities that have been popping up that we haven't gotten to yet.
Just looking back, like WrestleMania 35, like was it Colin Jost and like the other SNL dude?
Colin Jost and Michael Che.
Yeah, like they had a big thing with Braun Strowman, and it kind of just symbolized how much they didn't really care about Braun Strowman, why he's out of the company now. Like, he's feuding with SNL hosts who, like, like SNL, like, they'll have a viral clip once in a while, but SNL has not been relevant in many years. And it did not do any good for Braun Strowman to be feuding with these guys, especially of how big he is and how regular size they are. Like, it didn't really matter for Braun Strowman to feud with them.
Well, I don't think it was presented as like they're beating up Braun Strowman, but
I mean, sure,
I mean, I don't turn that down. Like, if it's like you want to do a little angle on Saturday Night Live, that to me, that's like I know it's not like the SNL of 30 or 40 years ago. But to me, that's still like mainstream relevant enough to get. It's hard in culture to find like something that would be like that. But I see, again, like I don't have a problem with the celebrities at WrestleMania, but I do think it, like I said, shines a light on like kind of like I don't care about the mid card at all, so the celebrities don't bother me when maybe they would if the like to use like to compare it to like if there was like a celebrity match on AEW Revolution, like unless there was like a mega celebrity, I would view it as like a complete waste because like there's so much good stuff on this card, like there's so many good wrestlers and that aren't going to get on this card, like. I don't want to see it wasted on like a random celebrity spot. But with WWE, that's just not the case, especially with the 2 nights of WrestleMania, where it's like, yeah, bring on the celebrity. I wonder what it's gonna be like. And to me, like it does feel like they're relying a little bit more on celebrities for WrestleMania this year than they have in years past. I think it does expose the lack of star power on the roster. And, they don't have Undertaker to do a match. They don't have Triple H to do a match. They don't have John Cena to come back. The Rock's not coming back. Batista's not coming back. They don't have the same kind of they don't have the older stars that can rely on as much for WrestleMania. And so you are going to, if you're like, we need to make WrestleMania feel special, we need more star power, and you don't have that star power on your roster, where are you going to go? You're going to go to celebrities. And that's something that Vince has always leaned on, especially around WrestleMania time, is we need to be big. We need to be the biggest. We need to have star power. We need to make the show feel special. And it's like, okay, who else can we get? And it's like when the cupboard runs dry of like wrestlers who have star power, you're going to start relying more on celebrities. I would not be surprised if we get more between now and WrestleMania, as far as just, random people popping up at the last minute.
Yeah, it definitely helps for WWE, especially nowadays, with the trajectory of the company being more, just more so of their upcoming TV rights deals coming up soon. And they're going to renegotiate those. Having more celebrities definitely helps the brand appeal for WWE, and I think that's more important to them than elevating new stars.
Exactly.
And their in-ring product. And for Stephanie McMahon, as chief brand officer, she can hype up these brand deals. And celebrities nowadays are pretty much their own brands, like we mentioned previously with the influencers and such. There, like the people are the brands, and they're partnering with other brands themselves, actual products to sell. And for WWE, they are a vehicle for celebrities to, do whatever they want. And for WWE, they can hype up that, hey, we had Johnny Knoxville on, and the Jackass Forever. That was a big movie, or I guess it was. I don't know. Like I don't really pay attention to box office stuff anymore, especially during these times. Like they don't really matter, but still, like that's something to hype up on an earnings call.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good point to say that like they care, they want to impress network heads, they want to impress their shareholders by talking about celebrities that they'll know, because network heads don't know wrestlers because wrestlers aren't big stars anymore. So you can say, oh, like, oh yeah, we have Johnny Knoxville. I'm like, oh yeah, that's somebody that people in entertainment will know. He's been relevant for 20 years, through Jackass and through a couple of his other projects. So yeah, and they care. They care more about that than elevating it, creating a new star, because that's their business. And, they haven't been able to create, a lot of new stars. So it's helpful to say that. I mean, like we mentioned before, like it definitely helped their contract negotiations with Fox and with, NBCU with Rousey aboard. And remember they were touting, it's like Ronda Rousey signed a 3-year contract, she's going to be with us for the long haul. And then she did a year and then took 2 years off, 3 years off.
That's about right. Yeah.
So, and now she's back, obviously, but that's the kind of leverage that you want to have. And that's ultimately where you're going to make your money, is from TV and different types of partnerships like that with your content. And the more celebrities you can have to throw at people that, you might catch them like, oh, I love Johnny Knoxville. Oh, I love, whoever else, you end up digging up. I don't know if there's a lot of TV executives that are like, I love Logan Paul, but,
yeah, I mean, basically, as Stephanie McMahon, she continues to hype up. Like, I think WWE, like they're one of the most followed TikTok accounts. They're one of the most followed Instagram accounts for sports and stuff there. And so again, there's more hyping of themselves, just having, hey, we have this large following. Does that translate to anything else of substance or material? Not really, but still, they're just numbers on the board that makes WWE look good from a brand perspective, and that allows them to continue to do more partnerships in the future. They have this A&E deal as well that they extended their partnership with. Because hey, these are doing decent numbers. We continue to see growth in our numbers. Again, whether these are material sort of things, probably not, but still, like they look good for executives, and that's really all that matters for WWE.
Yeah, and it's not just WWE. To be fair, AEW does this too, where it definitely helps them at the negotiating table and from a perception standpoint, whether it comes from their upcoming TV deals or securing advertising rights to have things like, oh, Shaquille O'Neal, he wrestled on our show. So Snoop Dogg appeared on the show. Rosario Dawson appeared on the show. Mike Tyson, like these people that people would recognize as big stars. You get them and you get their kind of like influence, and you can market that. It's obviously beneficial.
Yeah, it's very beneficial for them, and especially I think another thing to bring up is that wrestling, like compared to the 80s, yes, you mentioned that the 20s and 30s, they brought in like the best boxers in the world, or at least iconic boxers like a Jack Dempsey or James Braddock, the iconic boxers of the time in the 20s and 30s. But at least for the 80s and the advent of pay-per-views and all that, wrestling was pretty new for a lot of people, and especially with what WWE would eventually become would be new for a lot of people. For now, I mean, like nowadays, 2022, people kind of understand what wrestling is. There's no new invention for wrestling, and so people already have a set idea of what wrestling is. And I think that's also another reason why celebrities don't really do it for a lot of people, because like, oh, you're doing the wrestling thing, I already have it in my mind, I know what wrestling is already. But for AEW, it is a bit different since it's a new company and they do things differently in terms of what people understand wrestling is, which is the WWE style. And so it does help out AEW for a slight bit for the celebrities because they are doing something different than what WWE is doing. But in terms of wrestling overall, celebrities aren't really a big needle mover for that reason, because people they already understand what wrestling is. But for the Cyndi Lauper or the Mike Tyson or the Mr. T fans back in the day, they didn't really know what wrestling was. It was just this weird thing on television or on pay-per-view that they saw once in a while.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, people knew what wrestling was back in the 80s, but what you had with the WWF and during that era was you created a whole new generation of fans, all these kids, exactly. All these Gen Xers that hadn't really watched wrestling before, that weren't around in the Bruno Sammartino days, and they weren't watching, Dusty Rhodes or Vern Gagne or whatever regional territory they were in. They would see, on NBC or MTV or wherever they were seeing it, wrestling for the first time or this type of wrestling for the first time, and you're creating a whole new generation of fans through, celebrity involvement. And you're right, like with WWE, like, when WWE went to Fox, there was this belief, and this is what, sent the stock price really high, was that being on Fox would be this huge advantage for WWE's business overall, because they would be on this huge network television, and they would be advertised during the NFL, and that all these people will see WWE and know about SmackDown, and that'll lead to more people going to live attendance shows and more people subscribing to the WWE network and more people buying merchandise, and all these revenue generators for WWE would go up. And that was why the stock price went up, is because people thought it would lead to a new boom period. It didn't. And the reason was because, yes, they have more viewers on Fox because Fox is in way more homes than they ever were on cable. But the reality is that everyone watching the NFL on Sunday knows what WWE is. There's no more novelty. It's not like you're, oh yeah, what is this, pro wrestling? Oh, like you're hearing a Michael Cole voiceover during like the 2-minute warning. You're like, what? I've never seen anything like this before. Like the typical viewer is not reacting like that. So there's not that much to be gained by that. And you can say the same thing from like the celebrities, which is like, okay, Ronda Rousey's wrestling on the show. Like maybe that brings some Ronda Rousey fans to the WWE product, but most people are like, oh, Ronda Rousey's doing WWE, whatever. Because you're right, because wrestling is not at that point in the conscious. I think AEW a little bit different for the reasons you stated, which is like, it's a new wrestling company. So you're not necessarily telling someone about pro wrestling or this old, you're not introducing people to this old brand that everyone has already knows. You're introducing it to, a new, what's this, AEW wrestling, another wrestling company that's not WWE. I wonder what that is. Like, I feel like there's more to be value to be gained there, at least relatively speaking, than it is from like people who these hypothetically clueless people who have never heard of WWE before.
Yeah, but you see with the AEW, like with the Mike Tyson thing, they were teasing something with the Inner Circle and Chris Jericho, but I guess clearly Mike Tyson's schedule was not, he couldn't fit in time for AEW with his, Roy Jones Jr. fights, and so like they kind of just dropped that angle very quickly and very quietly and very quickly. Like once it became clear that Chris Jericho was not, or the Inner Circle was not doing anything with Mike Tyson, they kind of just moved on right away, and no one really cared. The audience was like, okay, like I'm interested in whatever Mike Tyson might do, but if it doesn't happen, like I'm very happy because there's other things going on in AEW that I'm very much looking forward to seeing. But they're never dependent on an angle going very well for them, or just reliant on the angle popping off. Like if it doesn't work out, if there's nothing else after that, that's fine. I remember the Shaq match. After that, he was in the ambulance and he disappeared. And there's no explanation. Like, and even he was on the Turner show, the NBA Live show right after that, and he was selling his injuries, but other than that, it's like there was no explanation of why he disappeared from the ambulance after Tony Giovanni was trying to interview him. Like, he disappeared from the ambulance and that was it. They didn't really need to explain it because the audience, there's other things to look forward to in AEW that you can just move on to.
Yeah, well, like the Tyson thing in AEW, to me, it's like, as a viewer, it's kind of like annoying that this thing happened like in a vacuum and was dropped, right? Like you see it like this big angle, it seems like they're shooting, and then they never mention it again. You're like, I'm like, okay, it's kind of annoying. Like if I wanted to get invested in this, now I can't because it's gone. But at the same time, AEW is probably happy to be like, look, Mike Tyson was on our show. It was on social media. People, got the word out about AEW. We'll take that as a net benefit for us, even if we weren't able to like do a major match that maybe would have done a big rating. I think it's interesting that AEW uses, when they've had celebrities like Shaq and like Mike Tyson, they have used them to pop a television rating. They've used them to have a match that they, hype up for a few weeks and then have, or a segment that they're going to do. And WWE really doesn't do that. They have the celebrities on the shows, but it's always building towards a match, at at WrestleMania, or Crown Jewel, or one of the Saudi Arabia shows. It's not necessarily like we're going to try to pop a rating this week by having a celebrity in a match. It's kind of interesting. And I think in AEW's model, using it for TV shows, I think it's easier to kind of get away with a celebrity. Okay, celebrity's gonna have like a 15-minute quarter, gonna take up a quarter of one of our wrestling shows. Like, I don't think fans really are gonna care that much about it, as opposed to like a celebrity has a title match on a pay-per-view. That's a little different.
Yeah, it's definitely indicative of their business model, right? AEW cares more about their television, appeasing the Turner partners very much, and for WWE they already have these TV deals in place, and they have other things going on as a publicly traded company, that they can already have other things to appease their the stock price, the other people that they have to appease for themselves. But for AEW, yeah, like it's just kind of like in a regular TV show, like, oh, here's the cameo for this week. And that's kind of how they treat it, right? Like it's sort of like, oh, this is a new special episode for this week, but back to business for next week. Your regular scheduled programming will be on for next week. And you don't have to, you can skip this episode if you want to, you skip this segment if you want to, but still, like, we're confident that like this person can pop a rating, and that's probably part of their business strategy as well. All the research that they've done, that like, hey, we know when to put the celebrity on, and what day to put them on, and you're confident that like this can work for us. And if it doesn't, we just move on to the next week, because we're confident that in our in-ring products that it can still keep our audience engaged.
All right, I think that's going to wrap up today's episode. We thank everyone who's been listening, and obviously, comment, subscribe to our channel. If you've got any questions or anything else that you'd like us to answer, feel free to leave them below. And thanks a lot. We'll see you all again in 2 weeks. Maybe do WrestleMania preview. Maybe we do something else. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But for Jason, I'm Jesse, and you guys have a great weekend.